Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Brewing. Each and every week we talk about sports topics of local interest, maybe a national topic if we get one. We have a gambling segment, a segment of the podcast where you can ask me a question on any topic. It doesn't have to be sports related. It certainly can be. Just go to the X first, hit up the hashtag AskSkinnyAnything. As always, this podcast presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. Rick, these road trips for the Bengals and me are coming fast and furious. Just it feels like it's funny. When I was sitting in the press box Sunday and I said, guys, we're going to wake up and it's going to be Wednesday. And yesterday when we all got in the media room, they're like, dude, you're so right. It's just all of a sudden it was Wednesday. I said, yeah. All of a sudden we're going to be up in Cleveland going, yeah, it's going to be Wednesday. And I said, then the next week we got a short week going to Baltimore. These things are coming fast, it feels like.
When you pull an all-nighter and then you fly home the next day and it's a travel day, you just feel like you lost about 2.5, 3 days in a row. So
yeah, and I'm an idiot. So I did. I got done with my work. For this is you do it covering basketball too. People think that once the game's over, your work's over. That's really when your work is starting. For goodness sakes. So do a podcast, a column. I usually have to do a TV segment. Didn't have to do it because of Monday Night Football, but I got done about 4:00 in the morning. That's kind of when I guessed I'd be done. That was fine. And of course, the problem is though, you can't go to sleep right away, right? So probably fell asleep about 5, woke up 3 different times because I had my alarm set for 7:15. Didn't feel awful. I really didn't. I mean, felt like just a good 2-hour power nap. Then I got home, had to go to Paycor, do some stuff there, write a story. Then I had basketball practice that night. And then, of course, like an idiot, I had a fantasy NBA draft. I got home at 9. Rick, I made myself a cocktail just because I thought if I have maybe one good drink here, that'll knock me out. I don't even know if I took a sip of it because I remember just waking up at like 4 a.m. going, where am I? What day is it? And why is this drink sitting next to me? So there we go.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And by the way, that's why broadcasting is a much better job than like writing about the games. I've come to find out, because once the buzzer sounds, that's done with your work and you go enjoy a meal and you go back to your hotel and you sleep instead of writing till 3 a.m. or whatever time. So, speaking of which, I listened to your podcast with Trags. We actually had an Ask Skinny Anything question about that. Someone wanted to know, were you giving a speech to a crowd of supporters while doing the Bengals post-game show?
I was giving a speech to myself because of reverberation that was going back into my head. So apparently we have come to find out maybe StreamYard had an issue because you ran into a little bit of an issue with this. Trags ran into another issue on a podcast with this, and it seems to be fixed, but I tried to power through it because I didn't think it was going out as the recording. I just thought it was on my end, and I'm like, it's 2:00 in the morning, man. I ain't making this cat redo this thing. I'm just going to do it. Come to find out, it was part of the recording. So my apologies for those of you that listened. It was a good podcast in my opinion, but maybe you and I can recap the game now instead, Rick.
It was unfortunate that it happened to me later on because I really wanted to flex my producer skills here and be like, yeah, Local 12 just can't get it done without me handling the tech side of things. And then literally the next day it happened to me. So they beat the Giants 17-7. They take on the Browns in Cleveland this Sunday at 1 p.m. I listened to your podcast and I thought you guys brought up good points on kind of both sides of this game for the Bengals, some of the good things that happened and some of the disconcerting things that you saw as well, because it really wasn't a very good performance by the team, even though they got the win. So let's start with this. Did you find yourself more on the side of thinking them finding a way to win an ugly one like that was a step in the right direction? Or was it more disheartening to see the offense take a step back after we were talking about how well they were playing the last few weeks?
Yeah, I'm going to lean towards the former. I think a lot of that had to do with that Giants defensive front. I really do. The other part too, when they got that 4th down stop early in the second half, if Zach Moss doesn't fumble, that's at least 3 points on the board, right? That might have been 7. So now you're talking 20-ish. You scored 24 points in an NFL game. That's a pretty good offense, actually. So you were kind of around that number. If Zach Moss doesn't fumble.
The holding at the goal line, which
turned
into a field goal, which honestly, I don't even know if that was a good call. Looking back, I
didn't think it was. From where we are in the press box, it's hard to see. But once you saw the replay of it, it looked like he just pancake blocked him, for goodness sakes.
And this is another one you'd have to extrapolate out a little bit. But I thought late in the first half there, I think it was about 4 or 5 minutes left on the clock. They're getting towards midfield, and they have Jamar Chase wide, but had a few steps on his man on a crossing route. Put it right on the money. He just drops it on a 3rd and 5. If he gets across midfield, all of a sudden you've got plenty of time to work with. You're in plus territory.
And honestly, we've seen him take catches like that to the house. I don't think that one was going to go to the house because there were enough defenders around him, but he certainly was going to get ahead of steam, make a chance to make a move or two.
Yeah, I mean, it's the type of route you find him running often and making big plays on. So, yeah, they left some points out there on the field is what I'm getting at.
I think the one, if there's really a positive to it, it's that, they didn't finish the Baltimore game. They didn't finish the Kansas City game. This time the offense finished it. Now, we can argue whether Chase Brown should have scored or not, because that certainly was a storyline after the fact. They could have just as easily won 10-7 if he'd have gone down at the 1 yard line, but they finished the drive. I mean, they had the scramble drill play. Yoshi makes a good move and makes a good catch along the sidelines to pick up a huge first down on 3rd and 12. And whether Chase Brown took that run to the house or not, he took it across the first down line, and that basically clinched the ball game at that point. So they did that. Maybe that's a step in the right direction, that, hey, if the offense can finish some games, it finished the Carolina game. I mean, honestly, the offense really has finished the 2 wins, for goodness sakes.
Skinny, there are a lot of bad takes in last week's podcast that we did, but maybe the worst among them might have been my take that, the Bengals offense is rolling. They're just going to be fun and entertaining to watch going forward. It's the defense having problems, but it's going to make for really fun football. This game couldn't have been more opposite of the Baltimore game we just watched. It was boring. It was ugly. It was ugly. It was unfun to watch. So I apologize for that prognostication. But on the defensive side of things, where they did play much better, and I realize a large part of that is the Giants, did you think having a healthier defense made a big difference, or was this more about the Giants just not being any good?
No, and there's a caveat there. No doubt the Giants offense is not very good. It's missing its best weapon. I mean, Malik Neighbors was averaging, I think, like 8 catches for 96 yards a game. That's a big guy to take out of your lineup, even though he's a rookie. Wan'Dale Robinson is a very nice, probably 3rd receiver, and he was thrust into the number 1 role because he's technically their number 2. Darius Slayton then is their number 2. They just don't have receivers. They don't run it great. They ran it great the week before at Seattle, but they don't run it great. I mean, Daniel Jones was the quarterback, was the leading rusher. So yeah, you have to start with that. But I do think a healthier defense allows them to do this. And I'm writing about this actually today because I've talked to some players and talked to Lou Anarumo about this and asked Zach Taylor this question on Monday. I think the depth can be a big strength of this defense, especially the defensive line. You saw Trey Hendrickson go from playing 75% of the snaps in the first couple of weeks to playing 60% of the snaps in this game. And I think a fresher Trey Hendrickson is really effective. Sam Hubbard didn't say this to me, but Paul Dehner shared it with me, that he talked to Sam, who literally said, early in the year, we were literally just fighting for our lives from down to down because we were all exhausted, but there was no relief to be had. And so all you were trying to do was get to the next play. He said, this game, it felt like, hey, got a chance to go get a breather, get fresh, go back in. And I think Sam had another decent game. I like Sheldon Rankins. He didn't show up statistically, but he made some plays. BJ Hill clearly made some plays, forced an interception, and then had another ball literally hit him in the face. So I think that's the thing. And then you saw some in the secondary. Jordan Battle got a handful of snaps to get some off of Von Bell, and he made a nice tackle in the box. I still don't know if I trust him all the way in coverage, but it was a nice play. You saw Mike Hilton come out on 3rd downs for Jalen Davis. I don't know if that's the long-term solution moving forward. Maybe it is, but you saw Mike Hilton when he was on the field flying around making plays. So I think
pass breakup, yeah.
Making pass breakup, made a great tackle of Daniel Jones in space when Daniel Jones is not an easy guy to bring down. And I think that's the thing that maybe you can lean into, is the depth will allow this defense to take a step forward. I think they took a step forward the other night. It's not to an elite level because, again, to the talent they played against, you shouldn't give up many points to that team, and they didn't. But I thought it was a good step forward.
When I hear quotes from players in post-game press conferences or scrums, I usually pretty much write them off as just, they're just saying whatever they need to say to get out of the interview and using cliches or platitudes that they've heard elsewhere. But in this case, the talking about being able to be refreshed, get a breather, come back in with a little more energy, having your legs under you, it felt like the eyeball test backed that up watching this game. The defense looked different, and maybe that's just because the Giants stink, and maybe it's just because I want to believe that the defense has some upside and will get better this year as they get healthier. But it passed the eyeball test, at least for this one game. And I definitely think you saw, Sam Hubbard is definitely a different guy now than he was 3 weeks ago. There's no argument to be made there. He looks like a completely different player, and he's not the best defensive lineman in the world. He's never going to be a big-time edge rusher, but he can be an effective, solid NFL defensive lineman when he's right, when he's physically right. And so I think having BJ Hill back, those are making a big difference. And then having some depth, I do think, helped a lot. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come here for the defense going forward. Did you have any other thoughts on the defense there, Skinny?
No, the only thing I was going to say is Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill have now played 3 games together. And again, two of these offenses I'm going to mention, you can certainly laugh them off and understandably so. But they played 3 games together, New England, Kansas City, in this past game. Against New England, the defense gave up 13 points. Charlie Jones gave up another 3 with a fumble. In the Kansas City game, the defense gave up 19 points. Kansas City scored another, whatever it was, 7 on a scoop and score fumble return. This game, the defense gave up 7. Again, I know it's New England's offense. I know it's the Giants' offense. But it was also Kansas City's offense. And they held all 3 below 20 points to a 13-point average. I don't know if that's a coincidence. I'm not so sure it is. Now, am I here to tell you that B.J. Hill and Sheldon Rankins are going to hold Baltimore to 13 points? No, but I think they can at least help them get some stops to keep them, keep them in the game. I mean, the offense kept them in the game the last time, scored 38. You should win. So yeah, I do think that. I think sometimes we discount the health factor of, it's just next man up. Well, no offense, next man up got cut. Zach Carter got cut, and he was the next man up, right? So that tells you where we're at with this.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that does make a difference. There's reasons those guys are on the practice squad and not on an actual NFL roster getting snaps every Sunday. And I am very interested to see how that plays out over the next couple of weeks. Because if this defense does continue to improve, or at least is just solid enough to get by, then the things that we've been talking about this team's chances to make a run and still make the playoffs feel a lot more legit. And we talked about the NFL.com playoff percentage chances of making the playoffs that they had. It bumped up over 35% with this win over the Giants. Most of the websites that are tracking those types of things have the Bengals now between 35% and 45% chance to make the playoffs. One of the other ways to look at this is the betting odds, Skinny. I went to FanDuel before we did this podcast, and what would you guess are the Bengals' odds for yes and no to make the playoffs?
I'll say no is a minus 125 favorite.
Minus 130. Very close.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think about the yes, though?
The yes would be about a plus 110.
Plus 106.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where we're at with the, what is your thoughts when you hear that?
Problem is, I think they would sway significantly with a win in Cleveland, just because it would what it would mean in the division, inching closer to 500, all those things. I think I'd lean towards the yes bet.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think if you want to get it, you better get it now, because I think if they beat Cleveland, it goes under.
I agree. Money. I mean, there is a very real possibility this team's 5-4 going to Baltimore. A very real possibility.
Yeah, and I mean, nothing. They don't need to do anything crazy. They don't need to play a lot better than they've played the last few weeks. I think this team, what they are right now, is very capable of winning their 3 next games. Now, they're also capable of going 1-2 in those 3 games from what we've seen. But it's very possible they are over 500 when they play Baltimore. And if that's the case, then you have to feel like they have a pretty legitimate shot about making the play, or a chance of making the playoffs here. Skinny, 2 things about this Browns offense that I want to bring up to you. They traded away Amari Cooper for a 3rd-round pick this week. Also, Nick Chubb is scheduled to make his return against the Bengals. He hasn't played since week 2 of last season. What's the impact of those 2 things? Like, do you see that being a big deal?
Yeah, I got to think Nick Chubb's going to have some rust, right? He just, I mean, that's a long time being out. I mean, are you going to suddenly throw Nick Chubb in and say, toed it 22 times for us in your first game back against a defense that literally is going to gang up on you because Jerry Jeudy's their best wide receiver, and I'm not even sure they've got a second best wide receiver, and the quarterback sucks? I mean, yeah, Nick Chubb should have an impact for them, but he'd have a bigger impact if they had a quarterback who was worth a damn, and they hadn't traded their number 1 receiver. Now, that was probably addition by subtraction, because he was very disgruntled there. But you can't tell me this is a better football team going into this week than it was even going into last week, and it wasn't a very good team going into last week.
Logically, I agree with what you just said, and I love what you said. I want to be fully behind that, but there is a part of me that is scared to death that I know this Browns offensive line has been bad, but is it possible that Nick Chubb gets their running game back on track just enough to give this Bengals defensive front fits? We've seen them struggle to stop the run this year, and I know we're talking about them getting healthier and them improving here, but there's something about this game. It just feels too winnable for the Bengals going into it. It concerns me because it feels like it's like the Patriots game to start the year.
I mean, of late, and Chuba Hubbard had some nice runs and ended up going over 100 yards for Carolina, but I didn't think Carolina's rushing attack overly affected the Bengals defense in that game. So really in the last 4 games, that was a good performance by Carolina, but Washington didn't get the running game untracked. Baltimore, until Derrick Henry had the long run, didn't get its running game on track. Certainly not in regulation, it didn't. And this past week, the Giants really never got the running game going. So I think the track record of late is they've done a pretty good job against the run, and having reinforcements back should continue that upward trend. And again, when you're playing an offense that it just has to play in a phone booth because he can't hit a downhill pass or long pass. And, maybe he does. I mean, at one point in time, Deshaun Watson was considered an elite quarterback in this league, or at least a top tier quarterback. His decline has been just precipitous to the point where it's embarrassing to even watch him be out there playing. And there's a part of me, that's the part that I would say would lead you to be scared of, what if it clicks again for him one game? It just finally clicks of where he once was. That would be the scary part, but we're starting to build up week after week after week of just horrendous quarterback play to the point where the only reason they're playing him is because they're paying him.
Yeah, we're past that point for me. I kept thinking that, Skinny. Like, initially when I saw all the tweets and the memes, I'm like, this is a guy that everybody wants to pile on for obvious reasons. And so they're taking their chance to do it while he's making some dumb mistakes right now. I thought it was rust. I thought he was going to knock it off and then he'd be back to being like the Deshaun Watson that we saw when he dropped off the face of the earth because of all of the sexual assault allegations and other things he had going on. But I've watched him a little bit more as this game got closer. I've spent a little more time actually watching the Browns. He's horrible. Skinny, he's horrible. He looks like one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen play in the NFL type bad. I mean, I'm not trying to overdo it. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. That's really what I'm seeing the last few times I've watched him. He's pathetic right now. I would be much more worried if they were going to say, we're putting Jameis Winston in. That would concern me much more as a Bengals fan than Deshaun Watson. Right now, the concern for me is that Nick Chubb being back, that's going to fire them up. They're going to rally around that a little bit. And also it gives them something to focus their offense around of
understood.
Here's our guy now.
I understand that. And he's a terrific back. There's no doubt. I mean, but here's the other part.
Yeah.
That's the other part. I mean, how much is he affected by coming back off of the surgery? Knocking the rust off, is it going to take him 3, 4, 5, 6 games to do that? I'd have a hard time expecting Nick Chubb to come out here and go 22 times for 120. I just would. I think that would be a huge ask for anybody. And even if he did, I'm not sure they do enough in the passing game to even help with that.
Oh, that's true. That's true too. I'm not sure I'm fully convinced and over that thought just yet, but we'll talk more about it during the pick'em.
No, I get that because this Bengals team hasn't done anything to help you alleviate the level of doubt, right? It's like, I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop again. And this is a winnable game and it almost feels too winnable. And I fully understand all of those things. But listen, if you still think this is a playoff caliber team, it doesn't go lose to this Cleveland Browns team, even though the trend of the, they haven't won there since 2017. Burrow's never won there. Zach's never won there. They had a lot of negative trends going into the Sunday night game, Rick, and overcame all those trends. And trends to me are just what they are. They're numbers to play with and look at, but they don't speak to the reality of the moment sometimes. Yeah.
And to that point, we keep talking about with this Bengals team, it sucks that they don't have any more wiggle room, but if they can't win this game,
right,
then you're not good enough. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs. We shouldn't be worried about what they're going to do in the postseason anyway, because they're legitimately just not good enough at that point.
No, that's exactly the point.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on the Bengals before we move to college football here?
No, I do want to touch on Ryan Rico though. I mean, he has become a real weapon for this team. I mean,
he's great.
He has. He when he has to hit it far, he can hit it far. He's done a nice job of spinning punts high enough to where guys have to fair catch at the 11. Would I like it to be a little deeper? Sure, but I'm not going to pick nits on that. He's become a weapon. He's a flip the field punter who's starting to understand the directional portion of it and how to put some, the right touch on it when you're trying to kind of pooch punt, for lack of a better term. I mean, it feels like he takes about a half a step and doesn't even extend his leg very much on those. And he gets that backward spin. He kicks it high and the guy can't return it. He had a 55 yarder with no return and a 56 yarder with a 1 yard return, 2 55-yard nets. It's pretty good.
Remember when Huber first got to the Bengals and we would talk about he's the best player on their team. He's their MVP. Would completely flip the field for him and they were struggling offensively at that time. So it was like they needed that. But it almost feels like you're back in that situation where it's almost fun to see him come out on the field and get a punt opportunity because he can totally change the momentum at a given point.
And Tyson Anderson as well as a coverage guy. He got a game ball for what he did in coverage, down to punt, made a couple tackles. You got to have that too. You got to have a gunner who can do some things as well. And Tyson Anderson's really good at it.
Yeah, this tells you how good Rico has been at punting the ball. He had that botched hold on the kick that would have won the game, and yet people aren't really crushing him for that. I mean, it didn't really last very long. There were a few comments right after that game, but it didn't extend. People actually still like him. The fan base is supporting him so much so that they're going after Drew Chrisman, because Drew Chrisman sent out a tweet saying I can still hold, and people are now attacking him and trying to kill his small business. So we got all types of punter drama in Cincinnati.
Drew needs to stay off social media.
I disagree.
I know you do.
I've been following this circle or this saga for like 2 years now. We've been talking about it on here when no one else cared about Drew Chrisman, and the fact that it's now blown up and it's like a thing that other people are worried about now is so funny to me.
Can punters get CTE?
He might have it.
I mean,
well, I mean, you can moving heavy furniture too.
That's true too.
A piano or two down the stairs on your head.
Good point.
Yeah.
Sure, you could stop watching now, but let's be honest, you want to see more. So click some of those links, or better yet, go ahead and tap subscribe. That way you'll catch more content from Local 12.